says, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. And it goes back to the lips and lying and everything else.
Cause the people to go astray.
Excuse me?
Cause the people to go astray.
Yeah, cause the people to go astray. The leaven of the Pharisees, everybody knows about baking your bread. You put in a little bit of leaven, and the whole loaf, it goes through the whole loaf, okay? It distributes. The leaven of the Pharisees here was the commandments of men, teaching to God's there. They had the relationship wrong. God's not there to serve them. They're there to serve God. They had it flipped. God's here to protect us. No, we're here to serve God, and we can pray to Him to protect us. But they had it flipped. And that was the leaven that was there that went with the people that gave them a mindset to say, well, God's this figure that protects us, but we need to fear Him. There was no love. There was no following His word. There was people that were leading, as he said, leading the blind by the blind. And they were leading them into a hole. They're leading them away from God. We talked about that. What? Okay, we talked about that. In Corinthians, Paul talks about it more. This is the way any person is to regard us, as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. So Paul is emphasizing the fact that we need to be stewards, but servants. He's not here to serve us. We're there to serve Him. In this case, moreover, it is required of stewards that one be found trustworthy. But to me, it is an insignificant matter that I would be examined by you or by any human court. In fact, I do not even examine myself. So Paul's still at the beginning of his ministry. This is 1 Corinthians. This is early, okay? And he's still defending himself because there's still people saying, oh, Paul wasn't with Christ when he walked the earth. Everybody. Matter of fact, when the church started, Paul was persecuting all the Christians and like that. So there's still this rhetoric that's going around about Paul to say Paul's not really a disciple of God. For I am not aware of anything against myself. However, I am not vindicated by this, but the one who examines me is the Lord. Therefore, do not go on passing judgment before the time, but wait until the Lord comes, who will both bring to light the things hidden in darkness and disclose the motives of human hearts, and then praise will come to each person from God. So, who's going to reveal those hidden things and for what purpose? God is. We can look at what somebody's doing, but what can't we see? Their heart. That's right. We can't see their heart. So what Paul's saying is, you can't see my heart. Why are you judging me? The one who's going to judge, eventually, the things that are hidden, which is your motives. Okay? What you do, somebody can look at it and say, I don't understand what their motive is, and you're just going to have to let it go to say, God's going to figure that one out. If it's something that somebody's doing wrong or like that, you can say, this is wrong according to the scriptures that I understand it. Okay, can I help you? But condemning someone because of what you interpret their motives are, he's saying, don't do that. He said, God will do that. And He will do that to reward those based on your heart, which is what it talks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It's all about the heart. It's about faith, it's about hope, it's about love. But the love is the most important of those. It's all about your heart. So why can't we reveal what's hidden?
Only God knows.
Because we don't know somebody's motives. We don't know what's going on in their head. We don't know what's behind what they did. Okay, so a lot of the stuff you have to take at face value and say, I don't know why they did that. If they did something and you don't understand it, that's fine. But you can't look at them and say, what you did for the wrong reasons. Because you don't know what the reasons they did, unless they want to tell you.
Maybe because of our nature to sin, we are not qualified to judge others.
Well, that's true. And also,
The true one, the perfect one, can make judgment.
he can make the judgment. The other part about it is it factors out grace. When we start doing that, we start saying, well, God's going to give his grace to you, but God's not going to give his grace. It's not my grace. It's his. He decides who he extends his grace to. And I don't have any standard I can go in and say, well, God, you can't extend it to grace to this person because they did this or that or whatever. It's like, and then Paul warns a couple times about that, saying, here he's talking about it to himself, but he talks about it more broadly, I think, in Romans, where he talks about, he says, don't judge each other's. What he doesn't mean is if somebody's doing something obviously wrong, and they know it's wrong, you can say that's wrong. Okay, adultery, you know is wrong. If they're involved in that, you can say that's wrong. You need to get that out of your life. But if you take the next step and say, and you're going to hell because of that, you've just crossed that threshold. That's what he's talking about. What's the only judgment that matters? The final judgment. Those little things where you say, I didn't judge you were doing wrong. I saw what you did. I know what it said in the scriptures. It said it's sin. I need to see, can I help you?
You're sort of edifying yourself when you make a judgment on somebody else. You're saying, I can do this, so he's more perfect than he is.
You get into that mode. You get into that, I'm better than you because I don't get involved in that. It's like, no, we're all the same. We're all sinners. We're all in the same boat, okay? We all depend on his grace for our sins. It's just, people are involved in different sins, but we're all involved somehow in it. I'm not going to cover a lot of slides today. That's fine. Doug will be thrilled. Okay, so back to Isaiah. You turn things around. Shall the potter be considered as equal with the clay? That is made would say to its maker, did he not make me? Or, what is formed, say to him who formed it, he has no understanding. So we're back in Isaiah, what he's talking about, the people. So what's he describing here that people do today when something goes wrong? They blame it on somebody else. What does that lack? Accountability. Oh, I did something wrong, but it wasn't my fault. It was because of my parents. It was because of my teacher. It was because of my environment. It was because the TV made me do it. Okay? You talk about, what was the comedian? The devil made me do it? Yeah. Okay. They're always going to try and blame it on something else as opposed to saying take accountability for it. And here's what he's saying here is, well, I did something wrong, but God made me this way. No, he didn't make you that way. You chose to do whatever you do, or you chose not to do whatever it is you didn't do. There's the negative and the positive part of that. He talks about it in Romans, Paul. Will you say to me, why does he still find fault? For who has resisted his will? On the contrary, who are you, you foolish person, who answers back to God? The thing molded will not say back to the molder, why did you make me like this? Will it? Or does the potter not have the right over the clay to make the same lump, one object for honorable use and another for common use? So he's not saying anybody was made to sin, but he's saying there are different ways I form different people. Did I ask that question? What's missing when they say God made me this way? Accountability. Same thing Isaiah said, he said here. They're missing accountability. So that part here is talking about kind of setting the stage, okay, to see that the degradation in Judah. You've already seen the degradation in Israel, in the northern part. Now you're seeing the degradation going on in Judah. So blessings after discipline. So he's going to discipline them, but he talks about the blessings. So in Isaiah, it is not yet a little before Lebanon will be turned into a fertile field. The fertile field will be considered as a forest. So I've got a little map up there. On that day, those who are deaf will hear words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness, the eyes of those who are blind will see. So we're still in that chapter 29, so it's kind of still along the same lines. The afflicted also will increase their joy, in the Lord, and the needy of mankind will rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. So you can see what Lebanon is on the map. It's north. And this is the area where Assyria is. This is down here where Israel is. Down here in this particular area is where Jerusalem is. So this is Judah. This is Israel. So right now Isaiah has gone back, and he's, like I said, the way it's done, it's kind of scattered around in this particular part of the book, where it talks about different areas, where it talks about Moab, and it talks about eventually Egypt, and it talks about Aram, which is north of Israel, and talks about Israel. So here he's talking about Lebanon. Why would they be rejoicing at the fall of Lebanon? And by the way, the Philistines were right here on this side of Israel, right on the Mediterranean. Why would they be rejoicing? Because of what? How did they feel about their neighbor? How did their neighbors feel about Israel? They hated them. Kind of sounds like today, doesn't it? So they had another set of people that were going to fall. And who was it going to fall to? At this particular time, who's conquering all the different nations? Assyria. So you have Assyria that continues to move down. That little area there was also considered Aram, which is north of there. So he's talking about that same area that's going to be taken over. For the ruthless will come to an end, and the scorner will be finished. Indeed, all who are intent on doing evil will be eliminated. Who caused a person to be indicted by a word, and to set a trap for the arbitrator at the gate, and defraud one in the night with meaningless arguments? So, what would they have been doing in Lebanon that would have had caused anguish? Lebanon, like I said, was that part of it that was Aram. Remember when we studied the beginning of Isaiah? The nation of Aram is just south of Assyria. Okay? And Aram was building a pact with Ephraim and Israel to invade Judah. And for some reason, Judah made a pact with Assyria to say, take care of Aram and take care of Ephraim and take care of Israel because they're a threat to us, which they shouldn't have done. And they did. Of course, Assyria said, oh, sure, we'll do that. They didn't know what was going to happen to them as a result of that, but they took it over. But the anguish that would have been caused would have been the threat from Aram, which is where Lebanon is, to Judah. So that would have caused the anguish. But since they've been taken over by the Assyrians, we don't have to worry about Aram anymore. Well, you should have been worrying about the Assyrians a whole lot more than the people of Aram, but they didn't. Aram is where Damascus is. Therefore, this is what the Lord who redeemed Abraham says concerning the house of Jacob. Jacob will not be ashamed now, nor will his face turn pale now. But when he sees his children, the work of my hands in his midst, they will sanctify my name. Indeed, they will sanctify the Holy One of Jacob and will stand in awe of the God of Israel. Those who err in mind will know the truth, and those who criticize will accept instruction. This is still the molding of the people to get them back to God. And that's what he's talking about, is the redeeming that's going to go on. But it's going to be a rough path for them. What things that have said it by the foreign enemies of Israel have fomented, have caused to happen? One of the things, the world at this particular time what kind of gods did they have? It's way before Greek. It's way before Roman. They had local gods, didn't they? They had a god of your city, a god of your nation, a god of this, a god of that. Yeah. They had all these. And what did they say when, for instance, the Assyrians conquered a nation? You have a weak and puny God, because that God didn't defend you from us. So our God's better because we're more powerful and we took you over. So those are the things that the foreign enemies are saying about Israel is your God's not going to protect you. And particularly about Israel in the north. Israel per se versus Israel and Judah was, they were looking at it to say, well, God's going to save us, but what were they doing? Who were they worshiping? Idols, yeah. Asheroth, Baal, Molech, all those particular gods. So they were worshiping those gods. But then when they got in trouble, they go, oh, God, God, God. We're the ones who are giving them lip service and telling people what they want to hear and telling God what he wants to hear, but there was no sincerity in it. They're going to have some discipline, okay? He's going to promise it's going to be better, but it's going to be worse before it's better. So, this is a warning against an Egyptian alliance. So this is what they're doing. This is with Judah. This is a warning to Judah against an Egyptian alliance. Because what are you doing if you have that Egyptian alliance? You're not depending on God. The most powerful king in existence, and you're saying, we're going to go take care of it ourselves. We do that sometimes ourselves. So, this is chapter 30. That's kind of what stopped that thought there, and it started this thought here. Woe to the rebellious children, declares the Lord, who execute a plan, but not mine, and make an alliance, but not out of my spirit, in order to add sin to sin, who proceed down to Egypt without consulting me, to take refuge in the safety of Pharaoh, and to seek shelter in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore, the safety of Pharaoh will be your shame, and the shelter in the shadow of Egypt, your humiliation. For their officials are at Zoan, and their ambassadors arrive at Hanes. Everyone will be ashamed because of the people who do not benefit them, who are not a help or benefit, but a source of shame and also disgrace. So they're doing something they think is good and smart, and God's saying, it's sin to sin. You're not depending on me. It's a terrible idea. But what were those alliances for? What were they making the alliances about? Was it trade deals? No, wasn't trade deals. It was about, if I get attacked, you'll come defend me. And if you get attacked, I'll come defend you. Or it may have been just one way. I'll pay you. I'll pay you and pay you and pay you, but you'll defend me. And he says, don't do that. Your alliance is with me, not with somebody else, particularly somebody who has nothing to do with me. You didn't ask me. It's not what I want. And that's kind of what he's saying all the way through here. He says, woe to the rebellious children. Rebellious children are who? Supposedly God's people. So how do you feel about how they planned? He said, you're going to be really sorry. You're going to be really sorry with what happens to you. Again. Yep. And the interesting part is, what's their history with Egypt? They were enslaved for 400 years to the Egyptians. Why would you go to those people? Interesting thinking. So in 2 Kings, this is one of the two instances that I could pull out. This is out of 2 Kings chapter 17. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hosea, the son of Elah, became the king over Israel and Samaria. So this is giving you a place and time, but it's really talking about Israel. This one is about Israel. I've got the next one that talks about Judah, but this is Israel. And reigned for 9 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, only not as the kings of Israel who preceded him. Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, marched against him, and Hosea became his servant and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria uncovered a conspiracy by Hosea, who had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and had then brought no tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. So the king of Assyria arrested and confined him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded the entire land and went up to Samaria and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria, led the people of Israel into exile into Assyria, and settled them in Halor and Habor, and on the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. So, what I ask? So how did the setting up an alliance with Egypt work out for Israel? It was a disaster, okay? He didn't just go in there and take over. He went over there and took all the people that were there and moved them out, sold them off as slaves. And then he brought his own people in and had them settled in to that area, particularly the area that was just north of Israel, of Judah. Now, what did we call that in the New Testament, that area? It's Samaria. That's why they had such a problem with Samaria, is because most... Okay. Yeah. You're done. Yeah. It's because the people that were in Samaria weren't Jews. They'd been resettled there by the Assyrians. So that goes into the New Testament where he talked about the story about the Good Samaritan and why the Jews kind of went, whoa, that was so almost revolting to them, because he said it was about the priest, and he said it was about was it a Pharisee or a Sadducee? Was it a Pharisee? Both of those went by the man, left the man in the ditch, and the one who went and helped him was the Samaritan. And they held the Samaritans in very low esteem. And like that. So that's why it's such an impactful parable that Christ taught, is because of exactly what happened here in 2 Kings. 2 Kings. On the other hand, now we're in chapter 23. Now the rest of the acts of Josiah. Was Josiah a good king, bad king in Judah? This is about Judah. Good king, bad king? Good king. He's a pretty good king. Not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Judah. In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the king of Assyria at the river Euphrates. So again, there's negotiating going on between Egypt and Assyria, because Assyria is becoming a very big, powerful country. The king of Josiah went to meet him. When Pharaoh Necho saw him, he killed him at Megiddo. His servants carried his body in a chariot from Megiddo and brought him to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. Then the people of the land took Jehoaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in the place of his father. So they took the son, they made him there. It's interesting. Josiah was tried to be faithful to God. And quite frankly, he had rotten kids. Okay, so how had Judah fared when they had dealings with Egypt? Badly, okay? They didn't try and create an alliance, but Josiah went out to meet him because he was another king. And he killed him. Jehoaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 3 months in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, in accordance with all that his forefathers have done. Remember, this was the land of Jeroboam. No, I'm sorry. This is Rehoboam. Right? Yeah, this is Rehoboam. And Pharaoh Necho imprisoned, let's see, he did evil in the sight, and Pharaoh Necho imprisoned him at Riblah in the land of Hamath, so that he would not reign in Jerusalem, and imposed on the land a fine of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Then Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, the king, in the place of his father Josiah, and he changed his name to Jehoiakim. But he took Jehoaz and brought him into Egypt, and he died there. So Jehoiakim gave the silver and gold to Pharaoh, but he assessed the land in order to give the money at the command of Pharaoh. He collected the silver and the gold from the people of the land, each according to his assessment, to give to Pharaoh Necho. So, what has Judah just become with respect to Egypt? A what? They were slave? They were a puppet. They were a puppet regime. Okay? Who was pulling the strings? Egypt. Egypt told them when to do. Egypt. Who's supposed to report? Who was appointing who the king was going to be in Judah? King of Kings. God. They kind of got away from that. Now they have somebody who's pulling the strings. That's how far Judah is getting away from God. And it's leading up to the ultimate discipline in Babylon. So, back into chapter 30. The pronouncement concerning the animals of Negev. And I've got Negev on here, just to give you a place where it is. This kind of darker yellow here is the Negev. It's kind of a big desert area. It is just south of Judah. Here's Jerusalem. So this is the area where Jerusalem is. This is Negev. And if you go through Negev, you get down into Egypt. So he's still talking about Egypt in this particular section. Like I said, these two chapters are really focused about the relationship between Judah and Egypt and Assyria. Through a land of distress and anguish, from where come lioness and lion, viper and flying serpent. They carry their riches on the backs of young donkeys and their treasures on camels' humps, to people who will not benefit them. Even Egypt, whose help is vain and empty. Therefore I have called her Rahab, who has been exterminated. So, how do we know this is a warning to Judah and not to Israel? Because the alliance, who made an alliance with Egypt? Israel or Judah? According to 2 Kings 17, Israel did. And it cost them dearly. Judah never did. But they got forced into a situation. Israel walked into it. Judah got forced into it. So because this is going through the Negev, this has to be against Judah, because Israel's already gone. How strong is Egypt? They haven't been a superpower for a long time. Not like Assyria. Egypt had their time. They were at their zenith when they had the Jews captive. But they didn't stay at that zenith after the captivity. They stayed as a powerful country, but not a super country. I think the bell's going to ring in a minute. Where was I? Now go, write on a tablet in their presence and inscribe it on a scroll, that it may serve in the time to come as a witness forever. For this is a rebellious people, false sons who refuse to listen to the instruction of the Lord, who say to the seers, you must not see visions, and to the prophets, you must not prophesy the truth to us. So you can read this one. If you want to look at chapter 30, that's what Doug's going to go into next week. But you kind of see here, there are things that were reflected in the New Testament where they said, you didn't listen to the prophets, you didn't listen to anybody, and you're still there. And that was what Christ said about it. So he'll pick up next week here.